very well known, and then there's a bunch that are not. If there's
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
things to your locale, so that's some of the things that we had wondered about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is basically what I'm saying is you guys that are here early, if you have any issues, any questions, any things you think we should be addressing, now's the time to quickly let us have them. Yes, Colleen, go ahead.
Yes. The one thing that I found really interesting is that in all the elementary schools that I've taught at, they always have, their whole little recycling program. And every so often, once a year, when you had the speech contest, someone would talk about either the weather or climate change. But then when you go outside of the school walls, they're still throwing wrappers on the ground. Like, there has to be some kind of connection to make it seem that, oh, this isn't just a school thing, but it's an everyday thing.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. Anyone else?
For me, in the elementary school environment, I feel that, yes, we teach all these things and then we go into the bathrooms and the teachers do exactly what they told the kids not to do. The teacher that I taught with about don't use a paper cup every day, bring your mug to school. That is the same teacher that uses 4 paper cups before lunchtime. Every time she has water, she takes a paper cup.
Yeah, so good one.
I don't get that. People teach from the book, but they don't walk the talk. And
Absolutely.
I am just the foreign teacher. People don't, kids don't look at us as the foreign teacher to aspire to. They look at their pretty Korean young teacher and they want to be like her.
Follow.
Yes, I'm interesting to watch. I'm interesting with my viewpoints and what happens, but they will never aspire to be like teacher Sunette. They want to be like their amazing, beautiful Korean teacher. And so that is the example that is there. I'm so frustrated. I have arguments with teachers about this on a weekly basis. It's like, really? That is your 4th paper cup for today. There is a mug. Please use it. I've got extra mugs. But they don't like doing dishes. Seriously? Is it that tough to? I have a water bottle that I carry around with me.
Yeah. Now that is really, it's one of the issues that I am very up on as well. So, okay, so Michael, I see we've reached our official starting time. So, okay, here we go. Okay, good afternoon.
I'm going to introduce you first, really, really quickly.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have to butt in. Otherwise, Lindsay is going to get really mad at me and she's in the room. So I have to follow the protocols. So nice to see all of you. Daniel, are you stalking me? You've been in like every session I've done today already. Okay, good. James, nice to see you. Julian, Cow. Nicholas is here. Hi, Lindsay. Hi, Shelby. Again, Sunette, lovely to see you. That bread was delicious. She did some delivery to us yesterday. My wife loves her more than me. So, Carlene, nice to see you again. 안녕하세요. Hyomsong, nice to see you. Sam, we've met. Theophilus Van Inser. I just love saying the name, people. And just wait until you hear the voice. It's great. Nice to see you all. Leonie is amazing. She's going to take it away. And I'm going to just sit in the background and listen and learn. Leonie, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. Okay, so, right, let's get started on all of this. From my side, let me introduce myself very, very quickly. I used to teach in South Korea for about 12 years, was a member of KOTISOL, and basically still am, even though I'm no longer there in South Korea. And these days I'm doing a PhD in philosophy, specifically environmental philosophy. at Sofia University in Bulgaria, and I'm also living on a small, not really a small holding. It's about 3/4 of an acre in total, in a small village in Bulgaria, in one of the areas that is really sort of like the breadbasket of Bulgaria. I am surrounded on all sides with maize and sunflower fields. And the heart of the village is the local farming cooperative, where the big tractors and the big trucks and everything are. And I really appreciate them because it's keeping the village going. But at the same time, they are a monocultural farming situation. And as an environmentalist, I am not in favor of that so much, because there have been a lot of studies on the fact that monoculture farming is not a good idea, both for soil health and for actual crop health. You have to do a lot to maintain it, a lot of artificial stuff. But that being said, Bulgaria has some of the cleanest air that I've been in. And I mean, coming from South Africa, I thought we had pretty clean air. Bulgaria has the best yogurt in the world. It's absolutely fabulous. Bulgaria has soil that is so rich that me, who used to think that I had 2 black thumbs, actually had a kitchen garden going last year that produced enough tomatoes for me to now have 20 jars of either tomato salsa or tomato chutney down in my basement. So in many respects, Bulgaria is an ideal place to work with the environment and to do something with the environment. Specifically in terms of my own thing of looking at the environment and thinking about the environment and what I am doing in terms of my actual PhD thesis. People have mentioned it up to now, the gap between what is taught as a environmental ethics, so to speak, in environmental education and things like that, and the gap that then opens up when people move out of that educational situation into the real world, so to speak, if we can get that. And there's a very interesting article that I came across quite a while back, and that I'm going to use as the heart of my thesis. It's by 2 researchers, Agiman and Kolmus, and it really looks at this thing of why is there a gap? Why is there a gap between environmental education and environmental behavior? And the simple answer that they came up with was this: there is a gap because the ethics being given are either corporate ethics, or they proceed from a guilt perspective and bear little or no resemblance to the daily social ethics in a culture. And that, I think, is for me the heart of what this panel is going to discuss. What is our vocabulary that we use when we are discussing these issues? What, as English language teachers are we giving to our students in the way of vocabulary? Are there concepts in English that are not available to them in their native tongue? If there are, should we just focus on giving them those concepts to think about? Or should we instead leave the whole environmental education to a local level, to people who can discuss things in the sense of, I'm speaking your language, I'm part of your community, I'm part of what you are doing. Let's talk about what we can do in our native tongue. Should English language education even think about this issue? Or should we leave it to people that will specifically address the community's educational needs and environmental needs? So those are some of the ethical questions that I'm exploring in my thesis, and that I would love to explore with you guys today. So that is my introduction of what I'm all about. I'm going to now hand over to James so that he can introduce himself to you and tell you where he's coming from on all of these things. James, over to you.
Thank you, Leonie. And I will confess up front that I am a lightweight in this field. I remember attending Julian's ELT vocabulary session. I believe that was up in Seoul. I have very limited use in teaching ELT environmental language specifically, and so trying to interweave it into different lessons and things, I'm proud of being a part of National Geographic efforts with their lessons and some other areas. And personally, in my professional development, I have grown in the understanding of the field and how, Leonie, in our questions, we make mention of the fact that environmental education has been happening for the last 50 years. And so what has really changed in that time? And I'm curious just to really dig into what you all know. My great pleasure and honor is the fact that I was able to put the idea out for Leonie and Theo to meet up, because I met Theo through a master's program where I was exploring a project. He was not a part of that project, but he was very much a consultant and very much a contributor to ideas and things, where my project was dealing with conservation, youth conservation in Cancun, Mexico. There were these outside of school programs, but they were helping the students to really grow and take care of mangroves and understand the sea turtles and all the different things that were happening there. And it was youth led, just really energetic, really well organized. These kids were definitely global leaders at very young ages. I was drawn into that. And then that project kind of fell short. So then I switched over to another partner, Takumi Tanabe, Takumi Sensei, who was out of Japan and so deeply in love with the fact that bamboo was the answer to everything. And why weren't we doing more of that? And and then also how to reduce plastic pollution and actually turn that plastic pollution into oils, as far as kerosene and different things like that. So always a little bit of learning, but never really a lot of concrete production on my behalf, but there was always relationships out of that. And so then bring that back to Leonie and Theo, and just one, they're South African accents. They start getting into Afrikaans, and then I'm just sitting back like, whoa, okay, there's a lot happening there. But the fact that there could be this global collaboration, also, make no mistake about it, there is an opportunity to be very involved financially and very supportive of programs. And I hope that we get to dig into those things a little bit, because in my position, I have a lot of connections and ability to make a difference, even if I'm not on the ground in these specific places and areas. And so how I can either be a direct investor, or I can be a sharer of knowledge, or I can be doing those kinds of things. That was one thing that I really found to be some of the organic development of this conversation. And so I look forward to exploring the questions. I'm going to post them below, but I also really almost want to step back and watch the magic happen.
Thank you, James. That was James, and yes, I must thank him for introducing me to Theo, but also connecting me up to Sam, who is the second one of our panelists that I'd love to give an opportunity to present his point of view, his background, and what he is bringing to the whole situation. So Sam, take it away.
Oh, thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Good. Okay. Well, thank you, Leonie, for getting in contact about this. I think Julian had a hand in it as well, I believe. And thank you to Kotiso. My name is Sam McDonald. I work for the Korean Federation for Environmental Movements, KFEM, which is Korea's largest environmentalist NGO. And it's part of Friends of the Earth International, which was one of the big global environmentalist organizations. I also teach at a university in Seoul, and I've taught environmental issues in my ESL classes now for several years. In those classes, I often begin with the question to students, what do you think about climate change? And the most common response I get is climate change is bad. Now, technically that's a correct answer. It's not what I expect, and obviously issues with the framing of the question and language and everything. But I imagine those students in the future, when they go to work overseas, study abroad, when they're socializing with other English speakers or people from other countries, if that same debate comes up and they give that same answer, it's going to seem a bit naive. And the reason is because there's assumptions about that question, at least for English speakers. What do you think about climate change probably means, what are your views on climate skepticism? What do you think about climate taxes? Do you think the government's doing enough or not enough? What do you think about plastics? All this sort of stuff. And I think that's true for a lot of English speakers and a lot of people around the globe. There are assumptions what that question means, because there's a global debate about this issue. And the main point I'm trying to make today, I think, is I think our Korean students are often not part of that debate. For Korean students, 99% of their conversations are with other Koreans. The vast majority of their media, news media, information media is still Korean. And to some extent, they are isolated from the global debates going on around the environment and climate change. And I guess this was shown in 2019 when there were the big protests around the globe, the Fridays for Future's Greta Thunberg. In my country, New Zealand, it was estimated around 170,000 protesters showed up throughout the country, and that's a country of 5 million people. In Korea, a country of 50 million, I would estimate there are 5,000 people at the protest in Seoul. Now, there are dozens of reasons for that. There are many different reasons, but I believe that part of the reason is that young New Zealanders saw Greta Thunberg and saw the debates going on in Europe as their debate. Whereas for Koreans, it's still very much not, I don't think. And I think this trickles down into the environmentalist movement in Korea. At KFEM, activists at KFEM are actually really isolated. And this is actually true for most East Asian groups. KFEM, Friends of the Earth, Korea, the activists here have very little to do with our Malaysian counterparts. There's a lot of isolation, or Taiwanese or the Japanese counterparts. Whereas in Europe, whether you're French, Friends of the Earth, German, Italian, you're all meeting all the time. You're all chatting, you're all friends on Facebook, you're chatting on WhatsApp, probably in English. You're constantly in this debate and creating this narrative that's sort of unofficial narrative on environmentalism that's really, really important. And this is actually what I talked about, I think it was yesterday, with one of the heads of KFEM about this issue. And this year, what I've been asked to do is set up seminars, weekly seminars for all of KFEM. And basically my role is to keep them up to date on what the rest of the world is talking about on environmental issues. And this won't be reading news articles. This will be deep diving into environmentalist subreddits and Facebook groups. This will be listening to podcasts. This will be trying to tap into that unofficial dialogue that's going on, not just the newspaper articles you can Google Translate, but don't really give you the gist of what's going on. Essentially, what I want to tell them is, what do environmentalists talk about at the pub after the meetings? And I think this is kind of the wedge for ESL. I've always taught political and ethical issues in my ESL classes, and I've always been very nervous about doing it. I always don't want to sound too preachy. But on certain issues, I think it's important to teach students the global debate that's going on outside of Korea, because they are sometimes isolated from it. And my hope is that by exposing them to this broader debate, you prepare them better for the future and you create better knowledge of these issues. So I'll finish there, and then hopefully some more questions come up later. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Sam. That's great, and definitely, I think a big part of what we are talking about, that the local community is sometimes more of a thing than the international global community. And talking about local communities and local things, right now I'd like to hand over to my fellow South African, the man with the euphonious name that Michael loves so much, Theophilus van Rensburg Linser. And Theophilus, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Leonie. It's really good to be here. I'm sure everyone can hear me okay. Right, great, wonderful. Thank you so very much for this opportunity to share in this particular space. I was just sending a note to James, thanking him for looping me into this orbit. It sounds very, very exciting. I have a little bit of butterflies in the tummy. I feel a little bit awkward in your presence, and I hope that in the next 15 to 20 years, we'll try and figure out why. Briefly, I work in a small community in South Africa. It's a rural community, just northeast from a little town called George. When you have a moment to Google that, you'll locate a very, very beautiful part of the world, a fantastic part of South Africa. It's called the Southern Cape, which is part of a province called the Western Cape. And that region accommodates about 240,000 farm workers. They gave these farm workers a new title in recent years. They call them agri-workers. Now, that label has not changed the poison inside the bottle, and this poison of being uneducated, which I consider so eloquently identified by you, Sam, isolated, from what's happening around them, that the kind of interventions that folks from the outside think are needed to sort of provide the kind of elements for community upliftment, those interventions are so often tripped up by a lack of understanding what is local, understanding of what the needs are. And all of that's revealed so monstrously by the language that you use. So that whole region is predominantly Afrikaans, which is a language on its own, and but it has very, very strong roots in the Dutch language. Now, politically, the language was attributed to as the language of the oppressor, so that in 1976, there was this huge uprising for a sort of what is called an education in the mother tongue. Now, that pressure and that tension that was created there sort of got a great deal of the country to almost lean to an extreme. And that extreme, my father particularly articulated as a dangerous path when he said to me once, now this is in the middle of my school years, so I am the vibrant rebel. And my dad would say, well, you know, 2 languages, it's not a bad thing. Think about that, he said. Think about the connections. Now, this is an uneducated man that said, look, there's such a lot of connections to many, many other languages. So the battle that you're fighting, I don't understand. So most South Africans sort of grew up with more than one language. My father had a great deal of respect for folks who would come from the rural parts of the country, learn the English language and learn Afrikaans, because for some of them it was Xhosa or isiZulu or even Setswana. And so this malaise, this sort of battle about trying to find your space in the world, sort of burdened by the history, complex history of language, and has made sort of the efforts to help what I used to describe as under-resourced communities, but have in the last 6-7 years changed. And I thought, these are not resource-scarce communities. These are high-risk communities. And I think that sort of helped me to understand that something needs to be done. And so in this one community, we run a vocational training in agriculture. And that's the sort of congruence at this particular point to this whole dialogue about environment, because food security has, for many reasons in the last 2-3 years, particularly because of COVID, sort of surfaced. But then how do you, in that context, take vocational training for all of what we stand for? We have a different kind of approach to training, and I can elaborate on that in a different discussion. But for this particular dialogue, I've really struggled to understand and to find ways to just be normal in my communication as a teacher, and as to sort of get off this pedestal of having to have all the answers. And man, Sam, the kind of stuff you delineated, I thought that we all just stop, because your illustration is a potent sort of element of exactly the tensions we face. The one area specifically I want to zoom in has to do with this sort of other side, the better side of isolation, and that is sort of consilience, this notion of that things are more connected than what we want to believe and that we desire, because it is in the silos that we think we are comfortable. So I suppose my tension is not so much in the mechanics, but I do appreciate the mechanics, meaning these practical solutions that can be provided in this space when you have 2 or 3 different languages colliding around the same problem. And I can learn from that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here. The big driver for me is what's happening in your soul, what's happening in your motives as a fundamental core element in shaping the kind of transformation that you require. And I think some of you have already hinted at it. I think earlier I heard the discussion about the kind of dichotomy that exists, that a teacher would sort of encourage a certain kind of behavior, but he would fall short himself of playing by the rules he expects others to comply with. Or that students hear all the kind of encouragement of being frugal in the way that they manage their lives as the modern environmentalists, but that they comply in an environment when compliance is rewarded, but when they have to act out that kind of behavior on their own, they fall short. And I think that's the kind of area that I really think one needs to get right when you sort of collide with another culture. So that learning and living is never a separated, fragmented kind of activity, but it's more integrated in itself. I'm eagerly hoping that these moments will sort of expand my own knowledge, and at the same time benefit from possible future collaborations. When things become too cold where you are, you could always migrate to George. And when you get there and you stranded and you have no place to stay, call me. We'll pray for you. No, we'll do a lot more than that. We'll welcome you. So thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Theo. Yes, so basically to everyone, you've now met us as a panel, and I think you have some sort of idea now as to how we are, in our very unique and different ways, approaching what is a very, very real problem in the world. I mean, the fact that Texas has just had a major, I won't say meltdown, because they would have appreciated the snow melting, but a total implosion of their electrical grid, which really just showed how vulnerable we all are at the moment to the supply of electricity. We are so dependent on what it provides for us in terms of convenience, in terms of the support for life, in terms of making things happen, that when it crashes, like it now did in Texas, it's a huge issue. And yet electricity, we all know, is one of the major pollutants of the planet, especially the coal-fired power stations, which are still, unfortunately, the predominant way of generating electricity. Clean electricity is a long way away still. We also have touched upon this thing of community and culture, and I think where I specifically saw it, and that goes to what Sunette also shared earlier, that you know, the teachers, the Korean teachers, are teaching one thing in the classroom, but they practice something quite different in their own personal situation. I saw that when I first came to Korea, the amount of packaging that there was with everything. I mean, you bought a box of biscuits, and the first thing you had to remove was the outside cellophane wrapper. Then you had the cardboard box. When you opened up the cardboard box, inside it, each biscuit was in a separate little plastic packet. And those little plastic packets were then also inserted into a specially formed plastic container that would present them very beautifully, and so on. And I contrasted that with how I first got to know store-bought biscuits, not the biscuits that my grandmother used to make and would get put into a bin or a tin and would just be lying around loose. the actual store-bought biscuits were also in a tin that could then be reused. And they were presented neatly, but by paper inserts. And those paper inserts were wonderful for getting the stoves lit in the morning on the farm. So you bought a tin of biscuits, you ate all the biscuits, you used the papers to light the fires, and the tin became one more container for you to place your own food and things that you were using in. So almost zero waste, as opposed to what there in South Korea, where after you ate the biscuits, you had a huge amount of waste, supposedly to be recycled. And I think that ties into a question we did get from the Discord site. Rhett, thank you very much for submitting that. And maybe you can just refresh us as to what your concern was there.
May I unmute? Okay, you know, I've been working in South Korea for a long time, for almost 20 years, and I've been using a lot of different packaged books and published materials. And now that my sons are, you know, studying at kindergartens and elementary schools, they get a lot of these resource packs, especially during these COVID times too. And they bring back these big bags full of all these goodies and things and project-based learning. And it comes with CDs, it comes with everything you could possibly need, but I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to use it. I don't know how my son used it. I don't know. And sadly, it kind of gets recycled and I feel really bad about it. And it's actually motivated me not to, you know, okay, I can do project-based learning, but how can I take one little game and then reuse it with all my students for all my students and not giving even individually, you know, packaged things to each student? You know, where's the wooden toys that we can use forever, not these cheap plastic things that we use once? And that's kind of where I want to end. Thank you so much for bringing me into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Rhett. So James, Theo, Sam, would one of you like to address that, give some thoughts about that? Okay, Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I think Julian asked that question, the personal change versus structural change, that consumerist change versus the structural change. I might give an example from my own university where I set up an environmentalist group, Dongguk University. We started and we tried to deal with the plastic issues on campus. But it became really difficult because it's like, okay, let's encourage recycling. And then we figured out all the recycling is dumped down south. And I mean, in Korea, you're talking 60% of recycling is burnt, 30% for just trash and 30% for energy. So that's not a solution. Then we talked about, well, banning plastic coffee cups, and we got the campaign ready, and then the government came in and banned them. And this is a really big thing. This is, in my opinion, one of the greatest advantages of Korea is the lack of liberalism in terms of government. I think in New Zealand, people campaigned for decades on plastic bags. The Korean government did it in a month and banned them. Now, it's not fully implemented, but so what we ended up doing was we pulled back at the university level and we actually focused on other issues. We focused on air pollution. And the main campaign was about not necessarily changing actions on campus, but informing the students about the consequences of the university environmentally. So we calculated it all, we did all the stats. It worked out that given the coal power we use at the university, we produced enough fine dust to cover Mapogu, Yongsan-gu, and Gangnam in about a meter of unhealthy fine dust every single day. That's how much the university produces. So that's what we tried to focus on in terms of the plastic packaging became a nightmare to try and figure out what to do, but focusing on that energy thing, half to actually change the university's policy on energy, and half to inform the next generation of government officials and private company executives who are going to come through the university. Yeah, that would be my comment. Career's a funny pace for personal choice, because the government is often slow on action, but then takes very, very drastic action very, very quickly.
May I add my solution?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So because I work at a public, my own home school, I look for ways that I can decrease the amount of plastic I use or the amount of content I use through, printed books, printing my own books, and using staplers rather than bookbinding machine. I do have a bookbinding machine, but I do sometimes have to use it, but I can really cut down a lot of it by using content that comes from more renewable resources instead of buying books from publishers in bulk where a lot of waste happens. So I can really organize. If I really focus on how and what really needs the students really need, then I can focus on reusing that content again and again, so they're not just using it one time and then throw it away, that they could use it for the whole year instead of 1 month or 1 day. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rhett. That's a really good way of thinking about it, that encouraging the students to see the resources that they get as not just a single use thing, but as an ongoing resource that can build into a library for themselves. I think that's an important thing as well, is to sometimes just get people to see the possibilities of the materials, the things that we are struggling with. Are there other possibilities available to us? For example, I can just tell you one of the projects James mentioned earlier, that there's various things happening. The project that I'm busy with here in Bulgaria is called Apaswell, and it's basically going to be a retreat both for health and wellness, but also for what is called permaculture. And I've got the grounds for it and so on. And one of the things I'm doing is growing seeds, plants from seeds, and I'm using all of the plastic containers I'm getting. Like when I buy a dozen eggs packed in a plastic thing, they are ideal for starters for seeds. And I've got a whole collection of them. And at the moment, I've got a whole jungle in my sunroom with cucumbers and tomatoes and onions and carrots and peas sprouting out of the plastic egg cartons. So I think it's that, educating people that this is a resource, it's not a throwaway. Anyone else want to jump in on that question?
I could, if it's okay.
Go ahead.
So one of the things, and what I want to say here is probably a sort of gauntlet. Maybe in our future collaboratives we can keep each other accountable, and it's certainly something that I would welcome as number one to be explored, because what I'm about to say is something that we dream of. It's an aspiration that we have in our model for education. So the group that we sort of impact is older. So this is a sort of young adult group, anything between 18 and 32. So I'm so glad I made it into that group. So one of the things that we approach, one of the elements of our approach is you learn and you earn. But the earning part for us has got to do with cost. So trying to eradicate this issue of unemployment in South Africa you can quickly forget about what I describe as a global cultural sort of obligation or responsibility, and that's taking care of the earth and every single element in that. So we teach counting the cost as part of the business program that we teach, right? So we teach you your management plan, your business plan that you're able to put together needs to, before you implement it, you have to count the cost. And so in counting the cost, we hope that that will begin to inculcate a habit of, in very simple terms, and of course there's nothing new about this. This is almost deep insight into the obvious. And of course, before you embark on something, you have to count the cost. The difference is that you have to count the cost as it implicates you personally. And so at that particular junction, you know, we've discovered it is really, really, really tough. It's always easier to count the cost and somebody else pays, but it's very different when you count the cost and you pay. And so I'm wondering, especially from the teachers in the sort of space where you're talking from very, very younger children, if there are wonderful practical examples of how you do that sort of thing early on, and that could probably clue us who are further down the line to maybe return to some basics that we've probably neglected in the process.
Thank you, Theo. Yeah, definitely that sort of ties into the whole philosophical idea that, give me a child until the age of 7 and he or she is mine for life. If we get them early, we can perhaps change the world. But how do we want to get them? And Sunette, you were saying earlier something about how much the example that is set by teachers, older students, peer groups, and so on influences perception. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Leonie, I think the problem is the amount of exposure kids have to it. I see the kids perhaps 80 minutes a week. It's basically like teaching English. I see them for 80 minutes. The moment they leave the classroom, it's not a part of their daily lives. So they don't learn to speak English. So I can try and teach them about conserving water, or, use a plastic cup or your mug from home, your bottle, reuse it instead of using paper cups or disposable plastic cups from Starbucks or wherever. But the thing is if it's not a part of their daily lives, if the parents don't help as well, and they are educated at home, and it's a part of their societal lives, I feel hopeless. I feel powerless, because it doesn't matter what I say. I am just the English foreign teacher that they see 80 minutes a week, but they're exposed to all these other people in their daily lives for many, many hours. So how do I go about doing it? I feel powerless. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I hear you. That is absolutely something. James, would you like to address that?
No, because there's really no answer for that. But a possible consideration would be the one thing that I was able to have control of was my students in my class time, but also then how we did things in the class time and the topics of discussion that we had that turned into homework assignments. Now, granted, I had university level students freshman year, a bit more autonomous. And when I was introducing some of these concepts, they were in the middle of wanting to break out of their homes and get out into nature. And so one of the questions that I posted in the chat there was, this concept of nature deficit disorder. Have any of you heard that phrase or that concept before? And
No.
so this lack of awareness of what nature really is. Like, there are families don't go on walks that much anymore. Kids spend very little time in the world of natural things, walking barefoot on anything other than a sandy beach, going into places and spaces where they can actually listen to the birds as opposed to listening to the motorcycles. And so that awareness, increasing that awareness, and then causing them to just get into areas and spaces where it sounds like, Leonie, like you want to help create with this wellness effort. And I've seen a lot more of that, just teacher awareness of their own mental habits, their own mental hygiene, if you will. But the exponential conversation of teacher wellness, and that was happening 2018, 2019, as far as what I was paying attention to. And then COVID happens, and now you have a real sincere need for people for all people to be more attuned to what's happening outside. And so this nature deficit disorder was a phrase coined by Richard Louv, L-O-U-V. And the real emphasis that they put into was, how do we get kids out into these spaces and then have them interact? Now, one of the concerns was, well, if it's not being teacher led and we're putting these kids out into nature, there is this at least in the States, there was a push for a long time that you can't do that. It's not safe out there. And so my rebuttal to that is kind of twofold. One, it's probably even less safe on the digital internet highway. And then the other side of it is that then the offer of a solution was having family networks that you as a family unit, you go out and you knew that this other family was going to be there. So the parent is there, another parent is there, and then the kids are interacting with each other as an oversight. And it's not very, it's not very structured for the kids, but for the parents, that safety and that acknowledgement is there. But the ultimate goal is to get these kids out into those spaces. So for me, one solution was college students on their own. They have the ability and autonomy to get out of their homes. But then for younger learners, how do we really touch base with those parents and those parent community teacher parent conferencing and those networks to encourage those kinds of interactions among each other?
Yeah. Can I say something about that, James?
Sure.
And
then Nicholas is next.
Yes, it's a huge cultural difference. I grew up in South Africa, walking outside barefoot the entire day. I only put shoes on church when we had to go on Sundays. And then I came to Korea, even at our church here, where we have a lawn and everything. We're in a perfect situation where we actually have outdoors. If I take my shoes off to walk on the grass, you must see the looks I get. And I find that again, on Sunday, I went walking with my friend in a little nature reserve in the area. Outside, what do we have? 3 young adults, all outside on an excursion, getting close to nature, sitting on a bench, looking at their cell phones. So that is my point. It's like we have this idea of, yes, nature is good. I know these things. I encourage it. But again, you're in a culture, and I don't just mean Korea. The whole digital thing about people being on their phones all the time, that's a worldwide problem. But how often do I go, even just get people to talk? I took my kids, we went on we had English camp a couple of years ago. We went beautiful near the Jade Mines. The view is amazing. It's a big cafe with huge windows and trees and what have you. We went into the cafe after they did the official animation walk, and everyone then sits in the cafe on their cell phones. I went from table to table to tell them, please just put your phone down and try to talk to your friend for 30 seconds. And again, I go out and what do you see? You see families of 5. Mom is on her phone, dad is on his phone, and the 3 kids are on their phones. Why bother going out? It's at the core of a culture. I can complain about it as much as I like, but it's not my home. It's not my kids. I don't breed the culture of doing these things differently. I can tell my friends, you know what? You should really take your kid's shoes off and allow him to just run on the grass. No, but it's dirty. Yeah, there's water and towels. It's not a problem. Oh, no, but they might cut their feet. It's a part of growing up in life. Do you know how many what do you call it? Like skin off my toes and broken toenails and blood I've had in my life? It's a part of growing up. It makes you strong. That's life. But it's this protected environment, and nature has to be clinical. Every time a bug flies into my classroom, the entire class is disrupted because everyone dives under their desks and hysterically shouts, bug, bug. I just go, calm down. I catch the bug by hand and throw it out the window. How can you do that? It's part of the culture. That is the main thing, is at the base, the way nature is seen is different. Yes, we love going hiking. We love being outside, but it has to be clinical. Heaven forbid there's a bug on my hiking trail. Or a snake. Oh my God, not a snake. That is the concept. It's a cultural thing. And I feel like I am pushing against the Great Wall of China. I cannot do anything about that. Just little me. I have all these thoughts, I have all these opinions, and I know what is, in my belief, what is good, connecting to nature, how to balance it, but how do you carry it over to parents and teachers that is in a totally different culture and cannot see that?
Maybe Nicholas has an answer, I don't know, or a different response there. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, just to give maybe a suggestion to Sanette, because I've been in Korea for 10 and a half years, and it's always been the same story over and over. But one thing I focus on more is to make sure not the students, but the teachers that I work with. I'm sure all of us have good rapport with at least a couple teachers at our schools. When the adult tends to see you do something that's picking up the trash or pointing out, and that we shouldn't be doing that. That resonates more with them rather than, in my experience, with the students. And then I hope that the more I do it with them, that transfers over and maybe they pass that along to the students. But again, it is such an uphill battle. But I think after all the frustration, maybe try doing that with some teachers that you have good rapport with, and maybe something will come of that. But again, it's entirely almost out of your hands in the sense where you can't be them and yourself. You can only act, or what am I trying to say? You only can influence through your actions more than words, I think, is more beneficial than
Thank you.
Explaining it.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's, sometimes we do feel that we are, as Sunette put it, pushing against the Great Wall of China. But the point is, if we, and in my opinion, affect even one child that is going to be a future leader and will implement change in their environment, we have achieved an amazing thing. Carlene, you wanted to comment on something?
Yes, actually, the last time I was in Korea, I had the opportunity to see the difference between a school being in the city versus a smaller school being in a rural setting. And the kids who were in the smaller school in the rural setting, they were more like your countrymen. They were out in the dirt. They were barefooted, they were running around, they were having a good time, they were being themselves. But versus the kids in the city, you know, the one thing that they look forward to is that big school trip on the bus, you know, that they all go to, either to the coast or whatever. And that's what they get. It's either that or they go to, you know, if they are the kind of kid that like to play outside a lot or be conscious, they do that. But you only find like a handful of those kids versus the kids who are out with the farms and they see the dirt and they see the spiders. Okay, that wasn't my favorite thing when I was there though. I don't like the spiders. I wasn't, they said like, oh teacher, this has snakes. And I'm like, okay, it has snakes. You know, those things that they live with every day. And that came from the top down. Like everybody was pitching in. I remember, to my behoovement, the cleaning lady would come by and literally would examine every single piece of trash. And then from then on, I'm like, you know what? I'm not dumping my trash here. You know, because she was looking, say like, okay, is this recyclable? What can I do with this? Like everything was more, I would say, I would almost want to say like a hyper focus of pinching the pennies, not self-sacrificing. Unfortunately, we were next to somebody who used those coals, so, or they would burn things, and they would say like, oh, it's that time of year, everyone close the windows, you know. They were conscious of what was not only inside the building, but they were conscious of what was going outside in their community, because most of the kids had either grandma, grandpa, even their parents were farming, you know. So these kids, they knew what was going on versus the ones who could go to the coffee shop that was right around the corner, you know. So you almost have to take the whole idea of trying to make that connection as a plus and a minus. Also, I do agree on the sterilization though of everything. I remember, I know most of you were there when, unfortunately, they had the accident of the seawall incident, and everything shut down. No one was to go outside, no playing, no trips, and you saw how that affected the students who barely got that one time to go outside and see nature. It was like it put them in an artificial morning state. I mean, even the set of teachers who didn't want to really speak out, but they would speak to me, they go like, I hate this, I'm sorry for this, but I'm not sad. I don't want to be sad, but this is making me sad. You know, even those factors that are not even touching them directly, it touches them indirectly. And that's unfortunately, that's a cultural thing, but no one will ever speak up on that, because they'll always tell us, because we're kind of the outlet, because they know we really can't say anything, because who's going to listen to the foreign teacher, you know? So, I mean, yeah. So hearing everything, I really do, there is a hope, but unfortunately with those smaller schools, they tend to close down because there's not enough students. And that's the only sad thing about it. You get to do the most teaching with them. They understand their environment. They know what's going on, even though it's on a rudimentary level, because they live it every day. And yet, if they kind of don't dig themselves up out of the hole, they're going to be looked down upon as, oh, well, you're just a farm kid, like you don't really know anything. And that actually has to change. I wish it would change, but I don't see that changing anytime in the near future.
It ties back to the community.
Yes.
John, you wanted to comment? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And so, Sanette, I totally agree. Just thinking about myself as an individual, it's really difficult and can be discouraging and maybe paralyzing. Like, what can we do? And I remembered these community events that some of my friends used to organize. And unfortunately, the lead organizer has moved on from our city. So we need somebody maybe myself, like we should consider a revival or bringing them back. So basically it was a beach cleanup. We live near the ocean, and it would happen, I don't know, seasonally or a few times a year. And a lot of people would turn up, and there are so many positive outcomes because just the organization would be, bring 20 or 30 huge trash bags, like the biggest ones, and bring some gloves so you can pick up whatever is on the beach. And every time that I went, so many people were talking to us or looking at what we were doing. And I think every time a family, usually Korean family, would come and join, and they would, like a little kid would be interested, and they'd say, yeah, go ahead, here are some gloves, and thank you so much for helping. So it was really contagious to a limited extent. And I think even some media were there. So we had some English stories, English blogs anyway, written up about what was going on. So it was, I think if you have a community event, and this one really checked so many boxes because everybody loves to go to the beach anyway. So you can volunteer for an hour, make the beach more beautiful, and spread the good vibes to everybody who's around. So.
Thank you. Yes, and that ties into something that I feel, I sent a little message earlier, that one of the things about philosophy, as I've been looking into this whole thing of environmental philosophy and so on, is that at the heart of so many of the global philosophies, is this idea that as humans, we stand apart from nature. We are not a part of nature. And in fact, in most cases, we see nature as something inimical, which is what Sunette was saying, especially in Korea. Nature is dirty, nature is dangerous, nature is out to get us, nature is out to kill us. We're going to be killed if we go out into nature. And one of the ways that I think that can be changed is to have this thing that we were talking about earlier, the nature baths, where you go into the forest and you just sit there for a while and just experience it. But I also feel that nature needs to be brought into the city a lot more, in terms of the buildings where the roofs are garden areas, and even where we can do vertical gardening on the sides of buildings. That is something I feel we should do. So one of the things that I would like to, at this stage, do, we've got about 25 minutes left in this session, is maybe ask Michael to organize us into 4 breakout rooms, if that can happen. And we can have 10 minutes to just chat about a lot of the issues that have come up now, and then maybe get together and do a wrap up. How does everyone feel about that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. Okay, I see a lot of thumbs up and so on. So Michael, can you organize 4 breakout rooms for us? I would really appreciate that.
As Michael puts those together, in the chat room, I've put some of the questions that kicked off this proposal for the conference.
Okay, okay.
Means an imperative that you have to follow. Please, yes, by all means, use what is specific to your situation and how you can tell your story and glean from other stories, we are ready.
So, Michael, do we have the breakout rooms? Yes, no?
Here we go.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead.
So, so I think whether I follow my own liking toward the feather cats. I really love them.
Michael, are you there?
Or should I stop feeding them because my neighbor?
Is there someone there who can put me through to?
Yeah, I'm here. Where do you need to go? Oh, you're lost.
I've actually got two computers on.
It's almost as if we have to make that choice.
And on one computer, I'm in a breakout room, and on the other computer, I'm here, obviously. But I think I'm actually in the same account. It's very weird.
No, I'll shoot you off into room 2 because that's where your
great.
other one
Thanks,
is.
man.
Off you go. I see you, Eric Reynolds. Well, actually, I don't see you, but I feel your presence. Is that you I see, Leonie?
If you can wrap everything up, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Today, my breakout rooms gave people 60 seconds. Last night, I thought they had 60 seconds. They had 0
Oh
seconds.
dear. Okay.
Boom. That was that.
Okay. That's looking good. That's looking good. So
Michael Free plays the boom.
Laying the pimp hand down, as we say.
there we are. There we are. So it's looking good at the moment. And I must say, interesting discussion in the one that I did. James, how about you? Some interesting stuff there?
Yeah, Shelby and I were just talking just the general flow of how, or she's working with middle schoolers and we're university students, so just a compare and contrast to the different environments.
Yeah. Okay, I think everyone is back with us. I hope you all had some really interesting and good conversations in your breakout rooms. And thanks to James, we had the sort of main questions that we were hashing about when we were talking about this panel between myself, James, Theo, and Sam. And I think in a way, for me, the simple answer to all 5 of those questions is this thing that we as humans still see ourselves as users of nature rather than as being supported by nature. And for me, that is one of the things that needs to change. We need to see ourselves as a part of the cycle of life and death that is nature. And as Heidegger, here I go into philosophy, says, unfortunately, our own death is something we don't like to think about very much. It is the existential dread that drives us all to behave in the ways we behave. But once we accept that this life is the only one we have, and that our part in this world is to leave it a better place than it was when we came into it, I think we start solving a lot of these problems. So I'm going to give my fellow panelists a minute or so each to just their thoughts. James?
I would, I'm just going to quote the gentleman, a former journalist turned environmental education advocate, Richard Louv, L-O-U-V, and he quotes us out of the nature principle. And what he says is, the future will belong to the nature smart, those individuals, families, businesses, political leaders, schools, and students who develop a deeper understanding of the transformative power of the natural world and who balance the virtual world with the real. the more high tech we become, the more nature we need.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Sam?
Mine's not going to be as poetic. I just wanted to make a final comment. I think back to as a ESL teachers in the Korean context, I think the greatest value we have is showing what's happening in the rest of the world, showing things like Extinction Rebellion, showing what's going on in Europe, showing what's going on in terms of policies in other countries. Because I think the government here is able to move on this stuff very, very quickly if there is public pressure. So in my opinion, the greatest value we have is informing and showing how motivated people are in other countries to bring that same motivation and action and determinism into your ESL classrooms. I think is the greatest value we have. And that's how I would finish. Go.
Thanks, Sam. And Theo, over to you.
Well, I'll just sort of annex to what Sam has said, and in that pursuit of sort of exposing your community to what happens to the rest of the world, it would be prudent to elevate the understanding that what it costs to you personally is a big, big driver in change.
Thank you very much. So, Michael, I think we have reached the end of our session, and I'm going to hand back to you.
Ach so, wir sind sein. We are beings toward death. As Heidegger broke my brain reading Dasein in English translation, 2 different English translations, and in German. Forget it. I'm out. But I found a nice quote of my own because I'm not going to be shown up by James Rush. Cornel West stole that quote, and I love Cornel West. One for his hair, and other for his brain, which is underneath it. We are beings toward death. We're 2-legged, linguistically conscious creatures born between urine and feces, whose body will one day be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms.
I'm not looking forward to breakfast or what?
That's a happy thought right there. Okay, good. If you're done, I'm done. We've recorded this, so I'll just stop recording that right now.
To my fellow panelists for being here, for sharing their insights and their thoughts, and it was great. Thank you to all of you who attended. Bye.